For this exercise, we're going to be creating a simple still life painting using some of the different textured brushes and scumbling techniques that we talked about in previous exercises. For this one, you're going to set up your artboard much as the same way we've done in previous exercises. You'll have a painting artboard and a reference artboard to place your picture on. Also, in my layers panel, you'll notice that I'm still using the clipping mask technique to fill in specific shapes. But for this painting, I want it to look a little bit more free-form and more natural. So feel free to add other layers, and you'll see me do this. That adds on more details on top of it. I'm not looking for 100% picture-perfect perfection. Instead, I want you to feel a little bit more free with this technique and have it look like a more natural painting. In addition to adding some variety of texture to your brush strokes, you can also play around with the colors, the background, and give it a little bit more artistic variation. One of the last things that we're going to add to it will be a color overlay that will blend together your colors a little bit more and give it a little bit more unity of the overall color scheme. And you'll see me do that as the last part once the painting is completely finished. To get started, you should have downloaded a folder that's got 3 different images you can pick and choose from. Each one of these kind of has its own unique challenges. You've got a textured can, a colorful set of flowers, and some simple pears. Feel free to use any of these that you want. You only have to do one of them as your painting. The first thing we need to do to set up our document is to go to Photoshop, go to File and New, and the document size we want to work on will be set in inches, and this will be a 10 by 10 inch photograph. We'll keep the resolution very high. Right now we can turn on artboards, and we're still going to work in RGB color mode, and later on we'll change up the background. We'll say Create. This will give us our document to work in. One of the first things that I like to do is to change up the background color. Instead of painting on just a solid white or a solid, even a solid color, I like to give myself either some sort of texture or a gradation of color. One of the easiest ways of doing this is to go to the Layer drop-down menu, choose New Fill Layer, and choose Gradient. It will ask you to give it a name. I'm just going to keep it the default name and say OK. And from here you can choose the kind of gradient that you want. When you click on the gradient picker, you can see some variety of pre-made gradients. And you can also change up the style of the gradient once it's created. So you've got a radial, a linear. I love using the angular one. This one looks funny until you realize that you can click on your artboard area and drag it around. And this will give you a gradation going from one edge to the other, spiraling around that central point. If you want to customize the look of your gradient, you can click on the gradient slider. This will pick up your gradient editor, and from here you can pick whatever colors you wish to work in. Let's say I wanted to make mine more blue with a bluish background. And we'll say OK to this. Once you've got your gradient background set up, we'll say OK. And notice now you've got a gradient layer inside of Artboard 1. Anytime you need to make changes to this, you can simply double-click on the icon. This will pick up your gradient fill editor, and you can make changes from there. The next thing we need to do is to place our image. Let's go to File, down to Place Embedded. Locate whatever image you want to work on. In my case, I'm going to use the pears. When we hit Place, since we're embedding it into here, it'll ask you to size it up. So I'm going to make mine slightly larger. Place it the size that you want it to be. As long as it fills up your artboard nicely, that's what I'm looking for. And we'll hit Return. Now for now, I want to be able to trace off where the edges and details of my document are. So let's go to our Layers panel, create a new layer on top of it. Let's name this Details. As with the other one, I'm going to grab my pencil tool. And with the pencil tool, we'll choose a nice small pencil, and we'll set our fill color back to black. This way when I draw, it'll work with a dark color. Now I'll fill in the details that are necessary for this particular drawing. Now with the drawing set up, we can move our reference image out of the way. One thing that I'm going to do different, rather than setting up an actual artboard for our reference image, I'm just going to select a layer, and when I click and drag, once that image leaves the artboard that we're currently on, it kind of creates its own little separate artboard layer on itself. Now it's not actually in an artboard, it's just on its own layer outside of our existing artboard number 1. It's going to serve the same purpose that we need it to, so I can click on the edge of it and drag it down and resize it so that it's kind of out of the way, but still useful for what we're doing as well. From here, now I can jump in and start adding any kind of painting that I want to below my details layer. So I'm going to choose a layer below, create a new one, and inside of layer 1 is where I'll start actually creating my painting. The variety of brushes that I'm going to be working from will be either some of the new rake brushes that you can download from Adobe, or some of my own customized brushes that give me the texture that I'm looking for. Whatever works best for you, I want you to play around with the medium and give me that kind of natural, scumbled kind of look. Also, don't forget there's different ways of blending things together, so in addition from using a textured brush, I'll be using my mixer brush and also my smudge tool to blend together a variety of different layers that are done. Now, once I've finished my painting, one of the last things you saw me do was to harmonize the colors by adding a layer adjustment on top of everything. I'm going to turn off that layer adjustment and show you the drastic difference that it can create. Here's my painting that I had as I worked on it with the natural colors. And to be honest, there's not really anything wrong with the painting as it is now. But when you add a layer adjustment, it gives you the ability to create an overall harmonizing of everything that's on here. It kind of adds a little bit more pop to what you have. Sometimes it works better than others, but very often, if you know what you're looking for, you can tweak the colors and give it a good finishing touch. If you look at my layers panel, you can see I use the gradient map overlay as my layer adjustment. And within that layer, I changed its blending mode to soft light. Here's how to add this to your particular painting. I'm going to turn off the layer. Go to the very top of your layers panel, and the topmost layer, when you select it, now you can go to your adjustments, and I added a gradient map, this very last one on the end. Now a gradient map is going to look at all of your pixels, and in this case it's the lightest and the darkest, and assign whatever color you have on your gradient slider. In this case, since it's black to white, all of my darker pixels are black and my lighter pixels are white. However, you can choose some other predefined gradients. If I was to choose, say, the blue to red to yellow adjustment, in this case, you can see my darkest pixels are now blue, my medium tones are red, and my lighter and whiter pixels have become yellow. When you select a gradient, I'm going to choose, let's go for the purple to orange one. Now when you select the gradient, by its natural normal setting, or normal blending mode, you can see it will change up the colors to exactly what you have. But when you start to play around with your blending modes, this is where it will start to interact with the colors that are below it. For instance, setting it to multiply will generally make everything darker and add a deep, richer color to it. If you set it to screen, this will lighten up the overall area. I prefer to work in either overlay or the mid-tones colors. So here is overlay. It gives a nice, fresh vibrance to everything that's there. If you want your colors to have more of a two-tone or a solid tone, I tend to work in either hue or color down at the bottom. And this will give everything a nice color as if you're working in a monochromatic or a dichromatic kind of fashion. Hue gives the same thing but with a little bit more grayscale to it. So this is kind of a wonderful little finishing way of finalizing your overall color scheme. Again, I tend to add either overlay or soft light, and it gives me the better of the results. But you can play around with different kind of color combinations even within your gradient editor. If you want to play around and give it some different ones, simply click on the gradient slider itself. This will pick up your gradient editor, and then you can play around and see what other colors will give you when you change those up. Once you're finished, go ahead and save this up as a Photoshop file, and that Photoshop file is what you're going to upload to Moodle for this exercise grade.